Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about our trip to Morocco, land of enchantment. You will undoubtedly be enchanted by this trip. We have two departures next November of 2024 with the dates noted there. So without further ado, I will first of all give you a little bit of an introduction to Wheel and Anchor. If you are new, if you've listened to this webinar or our webinars in general before, you can put me on mute for a minute or grab a cup of coffee. Wheel and Anchor is a community of travelers from all across Canada. We started about 5 years ago. I've been organizing trips for Canadians for more than 30 years. What I sort of the epiphany that I had, if you will, back in 2018 is, the difference between, a group tour and a bunch of people who have a like-minded view of the world and view of travel. And there is a subtle or not so subtle difference between those kind of people. And what we've managed to do with Wheel and Anchor is bring people together who really appreciate slower travel, who appreciate the benefits of getting to know local culture in a more soft step approach. And in the company of other people who kind of think the same way. That it's a very, you have to come on a trip to understand what I'm talking about. The difference between, how we like to travel, how we like to socialize with one another. We have a lot of fun. We learn together a lot. And that's kind of the essence of what we're to achieve at Wheel and Anchor. So it goes beyond the destination and the itinerary to something even greater. And of course, the goal in all of this is to become well-traveled, and well-traveled is really about having that next level of understanding, having had the opportunity to go to a place and experience it, for example, in the company of a guide who's, we have some great guides that are going to give you all the details and share with you their experience, but also, to have the time and, with others to get connected to that local experience on your own. So we try to accommodate as much free time as makes sense. And you'll see that in this trip as well, so that you can explore on your own, but know that, there's a group of people there with you. So you can go completely on your own, you're with your partner, or you can, meet other people and go together. It's really the essence of what we're all about. So anyway, I'm not going to say any more about that. I just want to introduce briefly our team. My name again, Gordon Dreger, a founder of Wheel and Anchor, and curator of all of our trips. That being said, while I curate, there is a ton of work that goes into organizing and getting our members booked on trips. And certainly Barb and Paula are at the forefront of all of that. They're the ones that look after you while you're in the process of considering whether to join us and getting on board. So welcome again, Barb. And our special guest could not attend with us today, Fatima Zahra from Morocco. She was on our last webinar, but unfortunately, she got called away urgently. So it happens in the travel business sometimes. So she sends her regrets that she won't be joining us on the webinar today, but I will echo her comments and sort of the feeling of what to expect on this trip as we go along. So I'm going to take you on our usual digital journey across this interesting part of Northwestern Africa, and share with you about what you can expect along the way on our trip next November, which is basically the same itinerary as our trips this year in November as well as next spring. That being said, I make the caveat always that I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to travel. So we modify things with each trip. We allow ourselves to do things on the fly, make decisions on the fly. Our hosts are empowered to do that. So, whatever we talk about here, it may not be exactly that. Well, if anything, it'll likely be something more, but it could be something less, or we just tailor it so that you have the best experience on the trip. So we're not super rigid, although we obviously have a program that we want to go through. So let's touch on that now. Obviously, we begin and end in Casablanca. So here, the inset map, you can see Morocco, obviously, the closest point of landmass to the European continent up here in Tangier on the Strait of Gibraltar. But as I say, we'll fly into Casablanca. You can get there nonstop from between Montreal and Casablanca. Air Canada has flights, which makes it convenient from other parts of Canada. However, you can also fly via London, Paris, Frankfurt through the usual European gateways to get into Casablanca. We'll meet there, spend a night. We'll then travel overland up to the northern tip of Morocco to Tangier, explore a bit of that, get some great views over the Strait of Gibraltar. We'll then head down over the northerly mountain chain, which is the Rif Mountains, through Chefchaouen, ending up in Fez, where we'll spend a couple of days. From there, we head over the eastern end of the Atlas Mountains down into the desert. So we're here, we're going to be in the middle of the, or not in the middle of the Sahara Desert, but on the western side of the Sahara Desert. This will be certainly one of the many highlights of the trip. And then we will make our way down again along the eastern edge of the Atlas Mountains through Tourra Gorge to Boulmadades, where we'll overnight, and then finally over the mountains to Marrakech, which will be the last few days of the trip before returning to Casablanca, from where we will depart again. So that is our itinerary in a nutshell. And now we'll, as I say, I'll give you a few of the highlights along the way and give you a sense of what to expect. Casablanca, obviously the capital of Morocco. That being said, to be perfectly blunt, it's also probably the most uninteresting city from a touristic standpoint. And so we won't spend a lot of time in Casablanca, but its name, Humphrey Bogart, obviously all the history around the film and so on, but it is largely an industrial city. There are a few key highlights that we will see when we're there. We're going to visit the famous Hassan II Mosque, which is an incredible monument and a must-see when you visit Casablanca. We're going to visit the artist quarter as well when we're there. They have a unique Mdina. We will see Mdinas. Now, what does Mdina mean? This is Mdina. You see this in all towns in the Islamic world. Mdina basically means old town. So if you think about old towns in Europe, every city, every town in Europe typically has an old town, and it's the same thing in Morocco, except that they're called Mdinas, and they all have kind of their unique characteristics. So we will get a chance to check that out a little bit after our arrival day. So we'll come into Casablanca. You'll be met at the airport as usual, brought to the hotel, and then as I say, we'll have the morning before we head off up towards Tangier to get a feel for the city that, as I say, is not worth spending a ton of time in, quite honestly. But I wanted to mention here at this point our approach to this program in terms of the accommodation. And this was really important to me because from my first visit to Morocco, which was many years back, I went specifically to coordinate a tour for that time, and found that Morocco is, you'll find it interesting because, of course, we have an image of Morocco in our minds. We have the image that we get from having flipped through National Geographic magazines, decades ago or even currently. And so it's quite a juxtaposition of old and new. And so a lot of the touristic infrastructure in Morocco has gone towards hotels, which are quite modern and look like hotels anywhere. And that's fine. But for me, the essence of being in Morocco is largely about the riads. Barb, did you want to say something? Everything okay? Okay, no, all good. The essence of staying in Morocco is all about the riads. And so what riads are basically old family houses. So this is where the nobility of Morocco lived in. They are typically in a compound, so like a square with a courtyard in the middle. Sometimes there's a swimming pool in the middle of the courtyard. The bedrooms kind of face all around. Sometimes they face inward, sometimes they face outward. But this is how, as I say, noble families in Morocco used to live and still live today. Many of them have been converted into small hotels or guest houses, and so it's a very different feel. They're they're still very comfortable, but you feel like you're in Morocco is the bottom line. And this is why we have taken great pains to secure riads in most of the cities along the way, not Casablanca, just because they just don't have them like they have in Marrakech and in Fez and so on, and obviously not in the desert where we're going to be staying in tents. More about that in a minute. But this is a big differentiator for us because I was so insistent that we have this experience of the riads in Morocco. And yeah, they're all very comfortable. They are rustic. They have modern Islamic components to them. They have antiques. It's kind of all over the place. But I'll tell you, it's an experience like no other. You will enjoy it thoroughly. And we have quite an assortment of them throughout this trip. And I say as well, it's important to note, again, because this is a traditional form of accommodation, not every room is the same. Some are a little bigger, some are a little smaller. They're generally speaking fairly generously sized, but you will spend more time particularly for a wheel and anchor type experience where, you will, if you don't already know some of the people on the trip, you will get to know people on the trip. And so because you're in a family home and they're run like a family home, it's a more intimate experience with the proprietors of the riad as well as your fellow guests. So I wanted to emphasize that because I've had such wonderful experiences in Morocco, in riads. And our host Alfie, whom some of you know, was in Morocco last year and checked out some of these places and was like, wow, this is the way to go to Morocco. So just wanted to let you know about that. As I said, we will head up the west coast of Morocco, heading to the north to Tangier, which sort of juts out into the Mediterranean. And as I mentioned before, Morocco has really evolved a lot over the years in terms of influence from Europe. They have a high-speed rail system that was obviously built by the French, by Alstom, that connects Casablanca and Tangier. And so it, as I say, it has some very modern infrastructure to it. And Tangier is no less of an example of that, a very cosmopolitan city because of the close connection to Africa. This is where obviously there's ferries going back and forth, goods and services, crossing the channel. So it's really the bridge to Europe. They have some interesting highlights here. Tangier was also a bit of an enclave for artists. You had people like Matisse, Cézanne, famous French artists who spent time in and around Tangier because the old town features the Mdina of Tangier features a big souk, and again, a souk, a market that we will experience in every city as well. So every city has an Mdina. It has a souk, it has a kasbah, which I'll tell you about in a second. And the souks here, the big souk, which is comparable to the ones in other cities, is obviously worth a visit. But the souko, the little souk, which is the true artist enclave of Tangier, is really, really a highlight of this city. So as I say, we'll have time, we'll be toured around, we'll get to know a little bit about this connection. If you think about in what's happening in the world today between Africa and Europe and the whole migration situation, not so much from Morocco. Morocco has a higher standard of living than most of the countries in Northern Africa. And so but they too are a funnel for some of this migration, and you'll see that in Tangier because that's obviously the closest point where the European and African continents meet. So after a couple of days in Tangier, we will make our way, as I mentioned, over the mountains through Chefchaouen, which is very cool because it's all in blue. And this is where you get the Andalusia being obviously a province in southern Spain. The Andalusian influence comes in here. And just as in southern Spain, you have the Islamic influence, particularly in cities like, Seville and Granada and so on, of course. The Chefchaouen has this Andalusian, this Spanish influence with all the blue tiles. The people here are particularly welcoming, as is the case in a lot of places. Big cities, yeah, they're a little bit more big city like. But here in these towns that we're going to visit over the coming days and in the desert, wow, the warm hospitality, you will really fall in love with the Moroccan people. When you come to a place like this. In Chefchaouen as well, they have a sort of like a farmer's market, or it's not just farm products, but products that are produced out in the hills. So as I said, here we are on the south part of the Rif Mountains, the range that goes across the north part of Morocco. You have traders, which is predominantly women that come in from the hills, bringing food, bringing their handicrafts, bringing all this stuff, and they congregate at the souk there. So it's quite a special experience. We'll have an organic or a farm to table lunch here at the so-called Dardara farm. And you'll get to sample some of the products that were grown, from immediately in the region. And these are the experiences that I think give you the essence of being in Morocco. We'll end up then in Fez, where we'll spend a couple of nights. Obviously, Fez is one of the cities that is the most important or most significant to visit. Fez, of course, is the spiritual capital and formerly the capital of Morocco. In fact, it only was changed to Casablanca about 100 years ago or so. And Fez, like these other cities, has some incredible architecture with the main mosque, but more importantly, the Mdina and the souks. And so, this gives you a little bit of the sort of the raw look at part of the city. It has a more touristic part, and it has a more here's how people really live part. We'll see the tannery, and we'll see various other handicrafts and so on. In Morocco, what you'll find along the way, I always say, you might want to leave extra room in your suitcase, even if you're not the person that normally buys souvenirs. I'm not, I never touch souvenirs, but the products that you find here that are, handmade, authentic, coming from, from our viewpoint, the middle of nowhere, are really, really quite amazing. And so we'll visit some of these places. We'll have an experience eating in the so-called Fazi way. So the Fazi are the residents of Fez. They call them Fazis, and we'll attend a dinner and again sample the different products, and you'll even see the differences between what they eat in Marrakech and what they eat in Casablanca compared to what they eat in Fez. We have a whole day free here because I'm a firm believer that some places like this are just great for wandering around. We have a guide. They're going to say, you can do this, you can do this. Obviously, we have our host. So you will have plenty of ideas on what to do. But as I say, it's important to me that you have the time to just feel it on your own. I think it's a good point to mention about safety in Morocco. Generally, it's a very safe country. Now, Casablanca is one thing. It's also a reason why we don't spend a lot of time there. And even Tangier, but it's not like you're going to go wandering around the port area on your own. I mean, for the most part, the touristic areas are quite safe, particularly in Fez. So you can comfortably and safely walk around the streets and enjoy the city and not really have to worry about too much. The one thing I'll say about the Moroccans is that they are quite tough negotiators in the sense that, the hawkers, like you'll find in a lot of cities, if you've been to Egypt, the merchants, people are always trying to flog stuff. But, if you're polite, say thank you, but no, then, you don't have any issue with that. But safety is not really a problem in anywhere that we're going to be visiting on this trip. So after Fez, as I mentioned, we'll head down again. Now we're going to head over the eastern end of the Atlas Mountains into the Sahara Desert, and you're going to love this part. I'm a huge fan of the desert, if nothing else, because of the night sky, which is absolutely brilliant because you are uninhibited by light pollution that you have in so many other places. We're going to stay 2 nights in a luxury tented camp in the desert. Here's a few photos of it. I mean, from the outside, it doesn't look sort of super fancy, but believe me, they pull out all the stops here. We will, depending on weather, be able to potentially eat outside. And when I say weather, the weather is generally very warm, certainly in the day, but the desert gets cold at night. So if it's too cold, or if there's a sandstorm, which are not uncommon, and a sandstorm in the desert, if you haven't experienced that before, it doesn't mean like it's like pouring rain with sand, like you can't even, but it is like a dense fog. So we're mindful of these things. It's an occasional occurrence, but that's part of being in the desert, and that's part of what makes this experience so interesting. The accommodations, really, really lovely. Everything inside the tents, it's set up like a 5-star hotel. We'll have the experience of the Moroccan, the live entertainment, kind of like you see here. The rooms, again, super cozy. You'll have such a sound sleep because there is no sound. It's a magical experience. So as I say, we'll have a couple of days in the desert. We'll have a chance to go out and see the Sahara in all of its amazing and stark beauty, for lack of a better word. I mean, this picture, I think, sort of says it all. We'll have a chance for those that wish to go on a camel ride. I'm always saying be cautious with the camels because they are a little bit unpredictable. But nevertheless, if it weren't safe, we wouldn't suggest it. But at the same time, some people, it's a lifelong dream to sit on a camel. If you've done it once, you probably don't want to do it a second time, but once is enough. And that we'll also explore through the dunes by 4x4. And, all in all, it'll be a terrific experience out in the desert. We will then start to head southwest from here, going again over the high Atlas Mountains. The scenery will change once again from the dunes, the orangey dunes of the Sahara, into the Atlas Mountains. And here again, it's very stark rock. The picture in the background gives you a little bit of sense of what you can expect. They have these deep gorges, Tudra Gorge being one that we'll pass through, with the oases that are down below. So the scenery is so different than most places that we expect, and that's obviously why we come to Morocco to sort of check it all out. We'll overnight in Bolmalnidades, which is again in the Atlas Mountains, and it's here that we will have a chance to experience some kasbahs. We're overnighting also in Ait Ben Haddou, which is an ancient outpost that is again in the mountains. And the Kasbah here is one of the most amazing ones that we'll see, so much so it's been designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. A Kasbah is basically a palace. Traditionally, like the one here in Ait Ben Haddou, is made out of mud. And so, again, this is really quite an architectural masterpiece. People still reside in these buildings, but a lot of them also have been left for UNESCO protection. And again, we'll see different styles and so on of kasbahs, but the original ones were made out of mud, which is why we'll spend some time exploring here in Ait Ben Haddou. We then go one more time over the mountains, ending up on the west side of the Atlas Mountains in Marrakech. The Atlas Mountains, very high, by the way. They actually have 2 ski resorts. One of them is not that far from Marrakech. So theoretically, if somebody was really adamant on trying to, don those skis, you could actually go skiing for a day on your free day in Marrakech. So if that's like something you've always dreamed of doing, but most people don't even realize that the mountains are high enough that they do have ski resorts up there. And Marrakech, where we'll spend the last few days of the trip, for me is an amazing city. I loved Marrakech when I was there, and I was, really dying to bring Canadians to it. That's why we're going to spend a whole 4 nights there, because you need a day just to wander the souks and wander the streets and soak it all in. Obviously, this is probably the most touristically significant and therefore visited city in Morocco. So, you'll see a lot more tourists than you will in some of the other areas that we'll go. Here we have some beautiful luxury riads that we're staying in. We, by the way, stay in more than one riad because they often only accommodate about 10 people. And so our groups are typically around 16 to 18 for Morocco. So you'll be divided into two riads that are not far away from each other in Marrakech. We will not only explore the city center, the Mdina, the the souks, which seem to go on forever. But we'll also get a little bit out into the countryside, and we'll visit, for example, an area just outside of Marrakech, where we'll do a cooking class and learn all about tagine. If you've eaten Moroccan cuisine before, you'll know that one of the staples is the so-called tagine. This is this upside down triangular pot. Famous dish is like chicken tagine. Oof, my mouth waters even when I hear about it. And various other dishes, lamb, goat, and so on, are prepared in these tagines. So we'll learn a little bit about that. And I know some people are so excited they just want to take one of these tagines back home, although they're a little bit heavy for the suitcase. We'll have a free day to explore. Again, here you can see all kinds of different colored tagines. You'll find millions of them, but as I say, they're not really super convenient to take home, even though you'll still want to. So yeah, keep that in mind. Maybe an extra piece of luggage to take home your new tagine. We'll hear and learn about how they prepare food in the so-called fornaci, which is the local ovens. And I recall my visit to Marrakech, which we are, I think, not quite at the right. It's a few weeks before our trip goes in October. They have their day, which is like our Thanksgiving, where they instead of turkey, they eat lambs, and they actually bring live lambs into their city, into their homes, and they anyway, I won't even tell you because it's a little bit gross, but they basically carve up the lamb. They cook it and no, actually they don't even cook it. They carve it up before they cook it while it's still alive. Anyway, this is part of Moroccan culture. You'll hear a lot about that. But as I say, it's probably a good thing that we're not there, because you just have lamb carcasses, sheep carcasses everywhere in the city when they have their festival in October. But again, this is what you like about this is why you want to visit places like that, because there's so many interesting things to visit. So you will love the time in Marrakech. And as I say, there's a whole day free to explore, for shopping, for skiing if you want to go back into the Atlas Mountains. It's a great trip, and we will bring you back at the end to Casablanca for the Hassan II Mosque that is pictured here. It really is a grand building. We'll have one more overnight, and then it'll be time to head back home, or perhaps head onward to Europe if you're continuing your journey next year. We just as a note, we were just literally discussing this the other day, so I'm not putting anything in stone yet, but we are thinking about having a trip in the south of Spain, in Andalusia, that I just mentioned, that will run adjacent to Morocco, probably just before. That's not confirmed yet. But just keep that in mind in case you were thinking, oh, because it isn't a logical combination to do Andalusia and southern Spain together with Morocco. So anyway, this program here, again, we have 2 departures next year for the first half of November and the second half of November. They are already partly sold because we had quite a wait list from the last 2 trips. So just keep that in mind. Here, the pricing, Canadian dollars, of course. This includes everything that I just described, of course, all the transportation, 14 nights in total, 2 of which in this luxurious desert camp in Merzouga, but otherwise in riads other than in Casablanca. We have a host that goes with you for the entire trip, as well as guides that will come and join us to share all about the different things along the way. And, gratuity, service charges, as per usual. Most of the stuff is on the ground. We have left some meals, as we normally do. Generally, my philosophy is breakfast and either lunch or dinner each day, other than on free days, is part of the program, but it allows you the chance to go. If you've had enough Moroccan food, you can go and find great other restaurants, certainly in the bigger cities like Fez and Tangier and Marrakech. So yeah, you're able to tailor your culinary requirements to your own preferences. The only thing, airfare and taxes is, and as well as insurance, is something we can provide for you in addition. And yeah, just to give you a sense of airfare, we don't commit to these prices. They have been a little bit all over the place, but across the Atlantic, they've been more or less stable. They've increased somewhat since the pandemic, but yeah, that's what you can be looking at just in terms, so you get a sense of what to budget for this program. So I will, in a moment, take any questions, and I think some have come in already, Barb. But of course, Paula and Barb are always there to answer your questions about this trip. I will note that in addition to our program itinerary, which is already in and of itself a fairly lengthy document that explains the trip day by day, we also have our additional information document, which is like a 2-page summary covering off a bunch of other details in terms of entry requirements, in terms of luggage and weather and all these other things that otherwise our program itinerary, our brochure would be 100 pages long. So if you have questions now, Barb, let's have a look at the questions, and we can start to.
There's a few that have come in. So one of them is, how many people would be on this trip?
Our Morocco trip is been typically pretty much sold out, certainly for the ones that are coming up this year and next year. And generally speaking, sorry, I have a lot of noise in the background. I'm just going to change my backdrop for a second. Generally, for this year's trip, we expect to have no more than 18. So between 16 and 18 people.
Yeah, I'll just add, so that first one, we have room for one single on the first departure, the 1st to the 15th. And then the second one, we haven't fully, it's going to open soon.
Exactly. We haven't even opened it up yet. So only one spot left for the first 2 weeks of November 2024. And we haven't actually released the second one. So there's still space there.
Yeah. We have a question about currency and the Wise card that we often use, and I guess particularly in a place like that for the market, if that differs at all.
Yeah, so I mean, whereas in Europe and Asia, much of the world, you can get away only with a credit or a debit card or a Wise card. In Morocco, in dealing in these smaller towns, these souks, you need to go with cash. The currency is the Moroccan dirham. You can certainly, when you arrive in Casablanca and any of the bigger cities, ATMs are ubiquitous. We always say that the Wise card is a good way to get currency, to transact overseas, because you just get a better exchange rate.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Another question we get a lot of when we're in the Sahara and the tented part is in terms of electricity. Is there hair dryers? If people have CPAP machines, stuff like that.
Yeah. So
how does that work?
Yeah, they have generators there, so their electric power is provided. So that's not a problem. We're not camping out in candlelight. There is electric power there, so you don't have to worry about that.
Okay. Somebody's asking if we're offering it in 2025.
Definitely, yeah. It's based on the interest in Morocco that we've been having so far. We will be offering it and we generally target November and March because winter is it's a bit too cold, even in Morocco, and in summer it's just way too hot. So that's where we go.
Okay, and then Janice is asking daytime temperature. So I guess maybe if we can cover both daytime, nighttime.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit all over the place because we're going to be in Casablanca, which is on the Atlantic coast. Obviously, we're going to be up in Tangier, which is also on the Atlantic, but closer to the Mediterranean, and we're going to be in the desert. So you have to be prepared kind of for a wide range of temperatures. Typically, the temperatures will be as much as the mid-20s. They normally aren't warmer than that in November, but in the evening, in the desert in particular, or anywhere that stops in the Atlas Mountains, it can be quite cool. So it can drop down even into the high single digits. So you need to be kind of prepared for a bit of a wide temperature swing of between, I would say, even as low as 8 degrees at night. I mean, it's, the tents are set up for it, and they're not fully heated. It's not going to be necessarily 22 degrees in there, but it will be cooler. So, it's nice to have, some warm fleece pajamas or something like that for sleeping in, or if you have to get up in the middle of the night or whatever it happens to be. But otherwise, during the day, it's lovely. And yet again, when we go over the mountains, it can be cooler. There can be some wind. But yeah, you're looking at 10 to 25 degrees on average.
Okay, and then Ella's asked about Wi-Fi. I guess overall in the riads as well as the desert camp, is that even
Yes, there
Wi-Fi?
is. I believe there is Wi-Fi in the desert camp as well. We can double check that. Cellular service in Morocco is pretty good for most of the trip, other than when we are in the very remote areas, when we're crossing from Chefchaouen down to down into Merzouga, into the desert. So there you will have some areas where there's no service. But if you are somebody that, really, needs to be or would like to be online, we do recommend SIM cards. And although they won't work 100% of the time, my experience is they'll work at least as well, if not better, than in Canada. So.
Okay.
Doesn't say much.
Yeah, I think those are the main questions that have come in so far. And we've got some people already booked on the trip that you've just made them even more excited.
Okay.
So that's great. Yeah, I guess if anybody is interested, they can definitely contact Paula and I. We have an additional information document that we can send anybody that is interested. And then we can send that out to them. It covers a lot of any other questions people might have.
Pretty much everything is in there. If there's something you really don't know, I mean, it's the Wi-Fi in the desert camp is, for example, I have to double check that. I'm pretty sure there is, but if it's a critical bit of information you need, just drop us a quick email and we will double check with our partners in the desert if they have internet. And we'll double check that if that's available or not.
Perfect. Cool. Okay, excellent.
All right, good.
And tomorrow we have our Georgia and Armenia.
Exactly. So yeah, so you put that in the chat box.
Yeah.
So that's it for our Morocco trip. Again, if you do have questions coming up, as Barb just mentioned, please reach out to them. And we have lots more webinars coming up. In fact, tomorrow you said was
Georgia and Armenia.
In Armenia, so two amazing countries between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. So join us if you're interested in that, where we're heading next September of next year. Yeah, lots more coming out soon. Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Take care. Have a nice day.